I am here now so we can have a conversation about what transpired, what the end result was, and most importantly, where we're going to go from here. A lot has happened since that vote. We have had a downgrade from AAA to AA plus by S&P. We have had an announcement from the White House that our first quarter GDP numbers were revised from 1.9% growth down to 0.4% growth. The second quarter GDP numbers were announced at 1.3% growth. We have seen fluctuation this week in the market. We were up yesterday after the chairman, Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke, made some comments about rates and what he was going to do over the next 2 years, and then today we saw another significant downturn over 500 points, in part I think because of issues related to France and Italy and other European countries. So it's certainly an up and down week, an up and down last couple of weeks relative to the market. Not any of us, I know, want to look at our statements in terms of our investment portfolios or 401ks, the dollars that we work so hard to try to invest for our kids and our grandkids. And I continue to take the same advice that I took a year ago and 5 years ago, continue to invest in the long term. Let me also say this. I believe that our country is going to get through the challenges we face. I feel very confident about that. What has been put on display by Congress was not exactly the most engaging movie to watch. It wasn't the best movie to watch. It was very frustrating at times for you and for many Americans, and I share with you in that frustration. It was very frustrating for me as someone who was involved and engaged in it. And one of the things that I've seen, and very big difference that I've seen, is the level of partisanship that exists in Washington. You know, I've served in different capacities in New Hampshire. I served as a state legislator, I served as a city alderman, and then obviously most recently as a mayor. And the one thing I can say that I think is great about New Hampshire is regardless of the issues, regardless of the debate, ultimately there is a decision made. And sometimes you'll agree with it, sometimes you won't, but we make decisions. You're able to, as a taxpayer, as a business owner, as a nonprofit entrepreneur, decide how you're going to react based on the decisions that are made. And what I've seen in Washington is a level of partisanship that I have never, ever experienced. And I'm sure that that frustrates you, and it does frustrate me. There's a couple of things that I try to do to minimize that partisanship. First of all, I think it's very important that regardless of what the subject matter is, I, as your representative, need to represent you with a calm, cool, and collected, dignified approach. And I think, and the goal that I think the Speaker had was to try to find something that wouldn't just pass the House, but pass the Senate, and then get an opportunity for the President to sign something into law. And the idea was to do this certainly before August 2nd. But it was clear after cut, cap, and balance was not taken up in the Senate that we were going to come down to the wire on any agreement that was going to be reached. So this bill did pass the House. It was then tabled in the Senate, and we went into House and Senate negotiations. And what came out of it was this two-tiered approach. Spending reductions 5% higher than the debt ceiling can be raised in both the first tier and the second tier. The second tier, we have a committee of 12, 6 members of the House, 6 members of the Senate, who most of which have been named today, not all of them, but most of the members have been named today. And their responsibility is to come up with about $1.5 trillion in cuts in order to raise the debt ceiling about $1.2 trillion on the second phase. And if they don't come to an agreement, then through sequestration, automatic spending reductions, there will be spending reductions across the board made. In addition, the legislation requires a vote in the House and the Senate. Not a vote in order to raise the debt ceiling, but a vote on a balanced budget amendment. And that amendment is being crafted, and I suspect that sometime before the end of this year, the House and the Senate will take up that vote. I don't believe that our problem in this country is that we don't receive enough money from taxpayers. I think we have a problem with how we spend. I personally don't believe that the government spends your money or anyone's money as efficiently as it could. I think there are many different ways we can generate revenue to the Treasury. I don't believe that we have to raise tax rates to do it. And let me go through a couple things. First of all, we have 15 million people out of work. Imagine if we actually had a scenario where we got half of those people back to work. There's some revenue right there, number one. Number two, you talked about GE. I wrote an op-ed about a month ago, and I identified GE as an example of how the tax code is unfair. It was in the Union Leader. I don't think, now what they did was they utilized the tax code to carry forward losses, and they didn't pay taxes. What I believe is that every single individual, every single business, every single corporation should be treated the same way. So individuals should be treated the same way, and the businesses and corporations should be treated the same way. That is not happening right now. There is bipartisan support in the House to address that, and we actually took it up in the budget, and we directed the Ways and Means Committee, which is the Committee of Jurisdiction, to bring forth legislation that provides tax reform to get rid of those inequities in the tax code. And I think most Americans, regardless of party affiliation, believe that we should do that, and I do too. I absolutely do. There is a feeling in this country of unfairness, that some get treated differently than others. And we shouldn't do that, so we are addressing that component. Relative to the war, so long as we can complete the mission and complete it quickly, I agree with you. Bring our troops home. I've made that statement many times publicly. I was one of the few Republicans that voted against my leadership when it came to the position on Libya. Right? And I voted to bring our troops home and all of our forces home immediately. Immediately. And I think that was reflective of New Hampshire and what New Hampshire's position is, especially considering the fiscal challenges we have. I think we need to reform the whole budget process, and here's how I would do it. The first thing we ought to do is go to a biennial budget in this country, and here's why. Year one, we would budget for a 2-year period. In year two, of course, that would require that the House pass a budget and the Senate pass a budget, and then you have the committee conference, you hash it out, you make the agreement, the President signs into law. Year two would be all about oversight. Every member of Congress would be sitting on a committee of jurisdiction who would oversee the dollars that they just appropriated and make sure that every tax dollar is being utilized effectively and efficiently. And I'll give you 2 examples, Medicare and Medicaid. Between the 2 of them last year, you know how much the government wasted? Almost $100 billion between the 2 programs. That's money that could be going back into those systems for people who are needing the assistance in Medicaid and for benefits that we wouldn't have to modify on Medicare. But our government is not doing that right now. I've only been here 7 months, I can't answer that one, but I can tell you what I would do. I am advocating for that kind of approach, to change the way we budget, to give individuals more power and more authority over how their dollars are spent. And to me, I don't think that's a Republican idea. I think that just makes perfect sense. And there is, again, bipartisan support for that. So I'm hoping that the mark that the 87 new Republicans and the 9 new Democrats can make in this Congress is to bring some of those kinds of common sense ideas, bring them to the table, and show some of the members who have been there 10 or 20 years how America would like its country to be run.